Over the past 10 years, the media landscape has undergone a dramatic shift. Here and overseas, Google and Facebook dominate the growth in digital advertising spending and play a pivotal role in how we find and consume news. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is now set to hold an inquiry into the impact of these online giants on the local media industry. It was part of the deal to get South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon to agree to the government's media reform bill. Richard Gingras is Google's Vice President of News. He joined me earlier in the studio. Richard Gingras, welcome to Lateline.
Thank you.
Australian media companies have laid off thousands of journalists in recent years. One of our federal politicians, Senator Nick Xenophon, says Facebook and Google have hoovered up all of that revenue and not invested much back into journalism. So it's a loss for democracy. Do you accept that's been the impact of Google's success?
No, I wouldn't, actually. I mean, I think one needs to really, indeed, understand what's going on in the ecosystem today. Of course, the big change in the last 25 years has been the introduction of the Internet, right? The Internet changed everything. It, in a sense, has been what I like to think of as free expression brought to life. That's fabulous, right? I think everyone around the world has had access to information and knowledge that they never had before. But it's also changed the marketplace for information. It's changed the marketplace for advertising, right? It allowed people like Craig Newmark in San Francisco to create something called Craigslist as a benefit to the community, which in the end had a pretty disruptive effect on the classified business in the United States.
Yeah, the classified business here has collapsed for newspapers and the real estate has spun off into new markets. But when I'm talking about ad revenue, Google and Facebook, they dominate that ad revenue, and to the exclusion of media companies, and that's driving a lot of the fall in job numbers. So again, that's where Google has benefited, through its own innovation, for instance, but the drawback for that is a loss of journalism. That has been the equation, hasn't it?
Well, indeed, again, the ad markets have shifted. I would note that when people talk about, Google's, in a sense, dominance in the ad market, that often what doesn't get mentioned is the fact that we send some $11 billion in revenue to publishers who use our ad platforms, right? We share 70% of that revenue back to publishers.
But you get 70% of all online ads or thereabouts in Australia, don't you?
That's probably not the right number,
but it's the majority.
There's no
more
question,
than 50%.
There's no question we obviously have had the great good fortune of developing new ad products. Google Search, obviously.
And in a free market, no one begrudges you for
Precisely.
for getting that innovation in and earning the market share. But the point is that the media companies traditionally use that to cross-subsidise their newsrooms, whereas you don't have a newsroom. So we don't have the journalists. That's been the byproduct of your success.
Well, again, the markets have changed, right?
But so are you going to put money back into journalism is the bottom line?
Well, actually, we put money back into journalism in terms of the revenue shares that we've talked about. We help 2 million publishers around the world with ad systems help drive revenue. But there's no question the economics of news have changed. It's also opened up opportunities for innovation for many new players, beyond legacy publishers to new players as well. And we're beginning to see great success there. And there are many efforts that we've undertaken to help drive innovation. Everything from our efforts to help streamline the performance of the web, to providing journalists with tools and data to help them do their work, to some recently divulged efforts to help publishers with their subscription efforts, because clearly subscriptions are going to be more of a part of quality journalism and the business model that supports it.
Yes, but you're not going to restore those thousands of jobs that have been lost. And at the same time, as you move further into video, do you think what's happened to the newspaper companies is now going to happen to the television companies, 7, 9 and 10, who also use ads to cross-subsidise their newsrooms?
Well, indeed, as we said, there's a dramatically different marketplace here. People are coming into the market with new video services, with new video content. It is a very competitive environment, But this, I just want to be careful in how we characterize that. This isn't Google's doing. It's the fact that we have a very rich and open marketplace for content.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think anyone specifically thought that you went out with the intent to do this. But do you see any responsibility at all to fill the vacuum that your success has created?
We do feel a responsibility, as I think everyone should in the ecosystem, to figure out how do we take and enable high-quality journalism to continue to survive and thrive. And there are many efforts that we have undertaken and will continue to undertake to help enable that. As I mentioned, how can we help with driving subscription revenue? How can we help with developing new ad capabilities and ad platforms that publishers can take and utilize? How do we help journalists with new tools? How do we help them with training to be more effective and create new and innovative experiences in the news space?
Just on that, that model, the first click free model that you've been working with publishers on, I'm interested in what you have to say to the publishers like Wall Street Journal who pulled out of that model and then said they get discriminated against because they're a paid website. And your response to that, published in Bloomberg, was they knew the risks.
Well, look, every publisher who offers subscriptions does recognize that they need to do some degree of sampling to achieve that revenue, to get people to subscribe. In fact, the first click-free program was something that we created specifically with news publishers in mind. Now, the market has changed. There is we're seeing great evidence of people who are more willing to subscribe to news products than we've seen before. We're also seeing more publishers putting up paywalls. That's a good step forward.
But they have to provide three columns,
well, no, that's
three items for free?
That has been the case.
And they pay you as well, don't they?
No, they don't pay us. No, not at all.
But they have to provide the free content.
Again, it's not that they provide the free content to us. They provide the free content to give users the opportunity to discover their brand and sample it. Now, what we have discussed with publishers around the world, including News Corp here, including the New York Times, the Financial Times, and many others, is how might we evolve these approaches. One thing that became very clear to us is when it comes to sampling, one size does not fit all. And so we are going to be evolving that program. We'll be announcing that in the next several weeks to give publishers, frankly, control over how they sample. It'll vary publication by publication, right? As you might imagine, a financial services publication like the Wall Street Journal, the amount of sampling required is quite different, right? It's a high-value content for the business audience, often paid for out of expense accounts. Different from the Australian general interest publication, they may need to do a greater degree of sampling than not. We'll give that capability to the publishers to let them decide how much sampling they want to do.
Just on the topic of free content, it motivated Spanish legislators enough to introduce a so-called Google tax so that you would pay money back to publishers if you published any of their content. Your reaction to that was to pull Google News from Spain. And so what happened was it was a disaster.
Well,
a lot of the small publishers suffered. So they lost the revenue originally by the success of your ads. And then when you pulled Google News, they lost again. So does that prove that you're a lot more powerful than you admit?
Well, actually, the Spanish experience was very interesting. Right, we were opposed to the law, as were all the small publishers, for that matter, and many others in the digital space, because the link economy, the ability of someone to link to an article, to link to another article, another site, is what makes the web what it is. And we didn't feel a link tax, nor did many others in the public policy space or in the publisher space feel that that was an important step. Again, with services like Google News, we send traffic to publishers. We send more than 10 billion visits a month to publishers, and each of those clicks has value to those publishers. The Spanish law, unfortunately, did pass. We did say we don't support a link tax, so we shut down Google News. But it was a very illuminating experience, because after a year, what indeed did we learn? In Spain, over the course of the year, internet traffic went up. Not surprisingly, it's a very mobile society, one of the most mobile in the world. What we did see was news traffic went down, and small publishers indeed were hurt more than large publishers, which only proved the point that aggregation services actually have an amplifying effect on news audiences.
But if you look at the Wall Street Journal case, if you look at the Spanish case, it just seems like it's Google's way or it's the highway.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. We've worked very carefully and collaboratively with publishers in the ecosystem for several years on how we could take and evolve approaches to help enable their success, right? And again, the point I think that was well proven in Spain was a link tax is not the solution. Right? The solution is to understand the ecosystem, evolve news products such that they're compelling to users, and take advantage of how the ecosystem works, of how Google search works, how aggregation services work, how Facebook work, to build those audiences, and obviously build their business models, and if it's subscription, build those subscription volumes.
So every company uses the power that it has in order to achieve some benefit for that company. And the job of legislators is to decide when do they step in when that's unhealthy for the market. And I'm sure you're aware that the federal government here is just about to announce an inquiry into big tech like Google and Facebook. Those companies have been specifically mentioned. How will you approach that inquiry?
As we always have, we will certainly engage. I'm here this week, frankly, talking to people in the public policy space. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to share our perspective, to make sure people understand our businesses and how they work. You know, I'll point out when people talk about the platforms, not all platforms are the same. You know, Facebook as a platform is quite different, a proprietary social network. Google has always been about open ecosystems. Our business is based on the open web, right? The driver of our success has been Google Search. Google Search's value is based on there being an open and rich ecosystem of knowledge. It's very much in our interest to make sure that it's sustainable and rich, which is why we take considerable efforts to continue to evolve what we do to make sure that's happening. And we will indeed work with public policy people to make sure as they consider public policy approaches that we're as wise as possible in doing so.
All right, Richard Gingras, we are out of time, but thank you for being on Lateline.
Thank you very much.